the USS Cyclops, the ship that never returned. Draw close, because this one is about the largest single loss of life in United States naval history that did not involve enemy action. 306 men, a ship of 10,000 tons, a vessel that was, by the best available evidence at the time of its disappearance, seaworthy, adequately crewed, and sailing a well-established route in reasonably favorable weather. It vanished in March 1918 without sending a distress signal, without leaving wreckage, without leaving a single body. The United States Navy has been looking for it, in varying degrees of commitment and with varying levels of technology, for over 100 years. It has not been found. Part 1. The ship. The USS Cyclops was a Proteus-class collier, a naval fuel ship built in 1910 and commissioned into the United States Navy in 1917 when America entered the First World War. She was large by the standards of her era, 542 feet in length, 10,000 tons of displacement, capable of carrying enormous quantities of coal and other bulk cargo to naval vessels at sea. She was not a glamorous ship. She was a working ship, the kind of vessel that keeps a navy operational by ensuring that other ships have what they need to move. Her design was unusual in one respect that would later attract scrutiny. She was fitted with 2 engines of different types, a decision made during construction that meant the 2 engines ran at different speeds and required constant management to keep the ship on a steady course. Engineers who have examined the Cyclops' technical specifications in the century since her disappearance have noted that this asymmetry made her somewhat more difficult to handle than a conventional vessel of her size, particularly in adverse conditions. In early 1918, the Cyclops was in South American waters, tasked with carrying a cargo of manganese ore from Bahia, Brazil, modern Salvador, to Baltimore, Maryland. Manganese ore is a heavy cargo, dense, significantly heavier per volume than coal, for which the Cyclops had been designed. The ship's holds, loaded to their limits with manganese, were carrying a weight distribution that some engineers have since argued was outside the vessel's optimal parameters. She carried 306 souls. Her commanding officer was Lieutenant Commander George Worley, a German-born naturalized American citizen whose loyalty would later be questioned, with no particular evidence, by investigators seeking explanations that the evidence did not provide. On February 15, 1918, the Cyclops departed Bahia. She made one intermediate stop. After that, she was not seen again. Part 2. The Silence. The Cyclops' last confirmed position was at Barbados, where she stopped briefly on March 3, 1918. She took on additional coal and provisions. Her crew interacted with port personnel. Lieutenant Commander Worley communicated with naval authorities. Nothing in these communications, as subsequently reviewed, indicated any problem, any concern, any awareness on the part of the ship's command that anything was wrong or likely to go wrong. She departed Barbados on March 4, 1918, bound for Baltimore. The route from Barbados to Baltimore takes a vessel north through the Atlantic, through the waters that would later be designated by a writer named Vincent Gaddis in 1964, in an article for Argosy magazine, as the Bermuda Triangle. Whether the Bermuda Triangle designation carries any meaningful explanatory weight is a question that researchers have debated for 60 years and have not resolved to general satisfaction. What is not debated is that the waters between Barbados and Baltimore are well-traveled, reasonably well-charted. and in March 1918 were actively patrolled by naval vessels engaged in the First World War. The Cyclops should have been visible to other vessels. She should have been in radio contact with naval stations along her route. A 10,000-ton ship 542 feet long is not easily overlooked. She was not heard from again after March 4th. When she failed to arrive in Baltimore in the expected time frame, a search was initiated. The search found nothing. No wreckage, no oil slick, no debris field, no lifeboats, no bodies. No distress signals had been received from any station that might have been in range. President Woodrow Wilson, when informed of the disappearance, is reported to have said that the loss of the Cyclops was one of the most baffling mysteries in the history of the Navy. He was not wrong, and 100 years of subsequent investigation has not made him less right. Part 3. The theories. The absence of any physical evidence, no wreckage, no oil, no bodies, no signal, has meant that every theory about what happened to the USS Cyclops rests on inference rather than evidence, and the history of the case is in large part a history of competing inferences, each of which explains some aspects of the disappearance and struggles with others. The structural failure theory is the most technically developed. The Cyclops, as noted, was carrying a cargo for which she was not optimally designed, dense manganese ore in holds built for the lighter bulk of coal. If the cargo shifted, in heavy weather, in a sudden storm, in the kind of rapid sea state change that the North Atlantic is capable of producing without warning, a ship of the Cyclops' design might have developed a list that, combined with the asymmetric engine problem, could have produced a catastrophic capsize. A vessel that capsizes suddenly and completely in deep water may leave very little surface evidence. The holds would have filled rapidly. The 500-foot hull might have descended intact or nearly intact, explaining the absence of the extensive debris field that a structural failure in shallower water would normally produce. This theory is coherent. Naval architects who have examined it find it plausible. It does not explain the complete absence of radio communication. A vessel listing badly, or taking on water, or in any kind of progressive emergency, would normally have time to transmit a distress signal. The Cyclops transmitted nothing, not a partial message, not an interrupted transmission, nothing. The silence was as complete as the absence of wreckage. The enemy action theory that a German submarine sank the Cyclops was extensively investigated both during and after the First World War. The German Navy's own records, examined after the war, contained no record of any submarine attack on a vessel matching the Cyclops' description in the relevant time and area. This is not conclusive. Records were imperfect, and not every action was fully documented, but it is significant. A submarine attack that sank a vessel quickly could explain the absence of radio communication, though it would typically leave some surface evidence. Lieutenant Commander Worley's German birth attracted suspicion in the immediate aftermath of the disappearance, during a period of intense anti-German sentiment in the United States. Theories that he was a German agent who scuttled the ship or delivered it to the enemy were circulated and investigated. No evidence was found to support any of them. The theories reflected the anxieties of their moment more than the evidence available. And then there are the theories that investigators prefer not to include in official reports, not because they are frivolous, but because the category of explanation they require is one that official reports do not have a section for. The waters through which the Cyclops passed have accumulated, in the century since 1918, a documented history of disappearances that the available rational explanations do not account for with complete satisfaction. Whether that accumulation reflects a genuine anomaly in a specific region of ocean, or whether it reflects the human tendency to find patterns in the distribution of maritime disasters across a heavily trafficked body of water, is a question that has not been answered to the satisfaction of either skeptics or believers. The Cyclops passed through those waters. She did not come out the other side. Part 4. The wreck that was never found. The United States Navy has, at various points across the 100 years since 1918, conducted searches for the USS Cyclops. The technology available for such searches has improved dramatically across that period. From the surface searches of 1918 to the side-scan sonar and remotely operated vehicle technology of the 21st century. The floor of the Atlantic between Barbados and Baltimore has been surveyed in portions. The relevant depths are significant. The waters of the North Atlantic in this region range from several hundred to several thousand feet, but not beyond the reach of modern search technology. The Cyclops has not been found. This is, in itself, a data point. A 542-foot ship does not disappear from the ocean floor. It sinks and it stays where it sinks. The ocean floor is cold and dark and largely free of the currents that disturb the surface. Objects that descend to it remain in substantially the positions they arrived at. The battleships and submarines and merchant vessels lost in the First and Second World Wars that have been found by modern search technology have been found on the ocean floor, essentially where they went down, sometimes intact and sometimes broken, but present and locatable. The Cyclops has not been located. The search area, the probable track of a vessel making way from Barbados to Baltimore in March 1918, is large but finite. It has not been searched exhaustively. That search remains technically possible, but it has not been completed. Part 5. The 306. 306 people boarded the USS Cyclops in Bahia, Brazil in early March 1918. They had names, ranks, families, home addresses in the United States and elsewhere. They had plans for when they returned from this posting, ordinary plans. The plans of working naval personnel expecting to arrive in Baltimore and proceed with their lives. They had no indication, in Barbados on March 4th when the ship departed, that they were leaving for the final time. None of them sent a distress signal. Not one of 306 people, on a ship with functioning radio equipment and a crew trained in its use, transmitted anything in what must have been, regardless of the mechanism of the ship's destruction, a final period of some duration. The silence is the thing that the theories cannot fully absorb. A sudden capsize could silence a ship quickly, but survivors in the water, if any existed for any length of time, might have had personal signaling equipment. A submarine attack leaves a debris field. A structural failure of sufficient speed to preclude all communication would also preclude the kind of survivable sequence that produces lifeboats. 306 people. No signal. No wreckage. No bodies. No lifeboats. The Navy's official position on the disappearance of the USS Cyclops is that the cause is unknown. That position has been held for over 100 years. It has not changed because the evidence has not changed, and the evidence has not changed because there is no evidence. And there is no evidence because whatever happened to the Cyclops happened completely, leaving nothing on the surface, producing no communication, depositing no recoverable remnant of 306 human lives on any shore that has since been searched. The North Atlantic between Barbados and Baltimore is still there. Ships still cross it. The water is the same water, moving in the same patterns, over a floor that contains, somewhere in its cold and pressured dark, a 542-foot ship and everything she carried. And the question that 100 years of naval investigation has not answered is not just where the Cyclops is. It is why 306 people, in whatever final minutes or hours they had, sent nothing. Not a word, not a signal, not a sound. And there, for now, we let the water have its secret. Until next time, sleep well, my friend.